So in beginning our fifth unit, the time frame is 1750 to 1900, and the name of this unit is revolutions. We're talking about ideological revolutions, we're talking about political revolutions, and then finally the big social and economic fallout of the Industrial Revolution. So first we go ideological, and we look at an era that's commonly referred to as the Enlightenment. Now, Sci-Rev is short for Scientific Revolution. When we look at the origins of the Enlightenment, we can begin with this so-called Scientific Revolution. Initially, this was something that was relegated to a handful of scholars. But gradually, this Scientific Revolution reached a wider European audience. The spread was aided by the printing press, growing literacy rates among Europeans, and different societies that discuss these ideas. Now, the Scientific Revolution was all about applying the ideas of reason and skepticism to the physical universe. It was physical. The Enlightenment is taking these same principles and applying them to human affairs. Now, really, Enlightenment is the long-term outcome of this process. And it was gradual. This didn't take place right away. It took place over several decades, and it's not really characterized by any one event. It's all about transforming human society. And the actual philosophers disagreed with one another personally. But we know that they tended to be satirical. They were critical and hostile to established authorities. They attacked arbitrary government, divine right, and aristocratic privilege. Now, the first type of idea that emerges would be new ideas on government. And the Englishman John Locke developed the concept of the social contract, or the idea that each individual is accorded with basic rights to life, liberty, and property. Now, in exchange for the protection of these rights, each individual agrees to surrender some of their autonomy to their local government. Even though, according to Locke, only males who owned property would be protected, he still laid out basic tenets for governments to follow. So first off, we have Locke and his social contract. Now, fellow Englishman Thomas Hobbes believed that human life was nasty, brutish, and short, and he advocated for the concept of an authoritarian ruler to provide order and stability. Now, when you contextualize Hobbes, he lived through the English Civil War, and he witnessed the chaos following the execution of the monarch. So yes, he wants authority, he wants a monarchy, but he wants logic to govern the monarch's decisions rather than divine right. And finally, Montesquieu, a Frenchman, took these ideas further when he argued for limits on government powers in a constitution. He wants separate and balanced executive and legislative powers. All right, Locke wanted separate and balanced, but Montesquieu wanted to add in a separate judicial branch. And he thought that the judicial branch should be protected from executive interference. So we're laying the groundwork for democratic and republican ideas with the Enlightenment. In terms of altering society, much Enlightenment thought attacked established religion and the perceived superstition, ignorance, and corruption that accompanied it. That's what many of these philosophers believed. Now, in his treatise on toleration, the man you see here, Voltaire, attacked the particularism of organized religion. He just wasn't a fan of it. He stated that man was inconsequential in the grand scheme of things, so it was foolish to assume that any one God favored one religion over the others. Many of these thinkers were also deists, and they believed that there was this remote deity who created the world, he set everything in motion, and then stepped back. and it sometimes is called the clockmaker theory. Now, some were deists, some were pantheists, and they equated God and nature together, and some regarded religion as a fraud. Now, they reasoned that God could be proven by logic and scientific inquiry. They didn't really have anything against organized religion, so to speak. Religion and God. They thought that they could go hand in hand. So, established religion, not so good. Faith is fine. Now, the role of women in society and their education were also topics of debate. Elite Parisian women often served as hosts of salons, where men would gather to discuss ideas. But many of these men didn't exactly espouse feminism. Rousseau believed that the education of women should be relative to men, and that women were actually inferior. Some disputed this and believed that men simply abused the physical strength that nature had given them. And the thinker Mary Wollstonecraft believed that until women received a proper education, improvement in knowledge needed to receive constant checks. So is there progress made for the advancement of gender equality? Yes, but it's not exactly speedy. Now, the Enlightenment era and Enlightenment thought was influenced by growing global awareness. Voltaire held up China as an example because it was a nation supposedly governed by elite scholars who stood on their merits, whereas continental Europe was led by aristocrats and military leaders. Confucianism was viewed to be secular, rational, and tolerant. So, it encouraged Enlightenment thinkers to ponder what Europe could become if superstition were eliminated from the equation. And really, the central theme of the Enlightenment is the idea of progress. Human society can be changed and improved if humans use logic and reason. And it became like a new religion unto itself. The Enlightenment is going to inspire global revolutions like the American and the French Revolution, although a lot of these will usually occur when the will of the populace coincides with the will of the elites. Some thinkers reacted against too much reliance on human reason. Jean-Jacques Rousseau argued for immersion in nature rather than book learning, which he felt would lead to more self-reliance and generosity as opposed to avarice and greed. The romantic movement that will occur because of the Enlightenment appeals to emotion and imagination rather than plain logic and science, while some religions will fuse science and faith, like the Quakers and Unitarians. So again, this Enlightenment, it's a process. It's several decades. We have new ideas about government, religion, and society, and it certainly will influence the revolutions to come.